Okay. So welcome everyone. Happy Earth Day. Can't think of a better time to have a water series than today. So thanks for joining us. And especially this afternoon for our monthly Headwaters River Journey speaker series. I'm Holly Riebel. I'm the Executive Director of the Headwaters Center and River Journey Museum. And joining me as a facilitator today is Marissa Belcaster, our River Journey manager. Say hello, Marissa.
Hello, I'm the person behind the picture.
So we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization dedicated to bringing community awareness and about water conservation and river preservation, as well as a community center providing educational programming, events, and rental venues. But before we begin our program, we wanted to announce the winner in our Earth Day celebration giveaway. Marissa, would you like to go ahead and announce the winner?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much to everybody who entered. I always think the giveaways are so much fun. So the winner this time was Paula Dawkins. I hear that she is friends with someone at Denver Water, so that's exciting. If she's not with us today, we'll go ahead and put that on our Instagram as well. So yeah, thank you to everyone who entered.
All right, congratulations. So today our program is on Denver Water, our challenges and collaboration in 21st century water resource management. And with us from Denver Water is Stacy Chesney. For 13 years, Stacy has been with Denver Water, the water utility serving 1.5 million people in Denver and the surrounding suburbs. As the Director of Public Affairs, she leads the communications, marketing, government, and community outreach strategies for the organization and oversees Denver Water's news site, TAP. And also joining Stacy is Jason Finehout. Jason has held the position of Water Shortage Preparedness Coordinator for 6 years at Denver Water. Previously, Jason spent 10 years in emergency management at the federal, state, and local levels. Jason has completed the Master Exercise Practitioner Program through FEMA and has taught over 200 classes, exercises, drills, and workshops. So welcome, Jason, and welcome, Stacy. Our speakers will present today, and then we'll open it up for question and answers the last 10 to 15 minutes. At the bottom of your Zoom, you'll see that there's actually a chat room. You can raise your hand and put in ask any questions there. And then at the end, I'll go ahead and select questions, and then we'll direct those to our speakers. And so with that, let's get started. Stacy.
All right, thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks, Holly, for having us. I'm going to start with a little video before jumping into the presentation. I think swapping screens and technology is going to be my biggest challenge today, so let's hope this all goes well. But a couple of years ago, we created a series called Journey of Water to help our customers appreciate where their water comes from. So I'm going to just start with this 2-minute video that is the first chapter about mountains, and then you can go and view the rest on your own. So here I go. One moment.
Really, all the water that we collect and send to Denver is snow melt. There's no pumps. It all makes its way to Denver just by gravity. Water connects us all. We have to be self-sufficient out here, taking care of the system that we are running water in, so our guys have access to all the diversions and things they need to get to do their job. Our group of guys is a unique group because they're willing to work outside. They're willing to do whatever it takes.
Ditch riders, we just call our canals and all that just the ditch. So I'm the guy who pretty much takes care of the whole system. There's always other ways to do a job. Me being a little shorter, I find different ways. Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't do this job or anything, because it makes me a better person for knowing my limitations, knowing when I need help.
We'll go out and actually measure the snow depth. We'll measure the water content. And that gives everybody in the water resource end of things an idea of what kind of water we're going to get from that snowpack.
Right when we go into winter is when we can have a lot of issues. We have different gates that'll start freezing and can turn into a headache. So that's why we're there every single day, making sure that those backups and floods don't happen.
When you say, what did you do? Why this direction? It's not following the money, but following your heart and doing what makes you happy.
It's just amazing to see where all that water comes from, how it makes its journey. Unbelievable. This job opened my eyes to that.
All right, so I'll switch screens here, but as I mentioned on our website, denverwater.org, we have the Journey of Water series that you can check out. And what I just love about it is, really putting also a face behind our people. And it's so nice to see, our caretakers who live up at our facilities and how much they really care. So it's always fun to be able to show that. All right, so let me switch screens and I will go here. 1 moment. All right, so let's dive in. Today I'm just gonna touch on a quick little overview of Denver Water, talk about some of our big projects that we have going on, and then get into some of the challenges and the ways that we are preparing for the future. And then I'll turn it over to Jason so he can talk about our water shortage preparedness efforts and the kind of water supply outlook for this year. So you probably are aware we are Denver's, Colorado's oldest and largest water utility, established in 1918. We serve a quarter of the state's population with less than 2% of all the water that's used in the state. We get our water from snowmelt in the Rocky Mountains, from the South Platte and the Colorado River sheds. And you got to see some of our 1,100 employees in that video that I showed just there, more than 3,000 miles of pipe and a lot of dams, reservoirs, treatment plants to ensure that we're providing our customers with a clean, reliable supply of water. So a little map here to kind of orient you to our system. So our collection system spans both sides of the Continental Divide, and we're served by surface water entirely. Obviously, it originates as snowpack, and about half of our water comes from the Colorado River Basin and the other half from the South Platte River Basin. As you take a look at this map, part of the reason I bring it up is you can see the different colored areas of our watersheds and our collection system, and you can see an imbalance there. So about 80% of our collection is on that north end of our system, and that includes water from Roberts Tunnel that we pull over from Dillon Reservoir. So all of that water in that yellow area eventually flows to one point, that's Strontia Springs Reservoir, and then to 2 treatment plants on that north side of the system. And then, of course, that smaller area in green is our Moffett collection system. That's the remaining 20%. And that gets treated at the Moffett treatment plant. And we are currently building another new treatment plant closer in Arvada called the North Water Plant. But the system imbalance can create challenges for us. It means greater costs and greater risks. So things like wildfires, which we see every year, can greatly impact our south end of the system and create treatment and operational challenges, where sometimes we have to shut off a treatment plant and look to rely more on our north end of the system. And then in droughts, we actually have faced in early 2000, we nearly ran out of water on that north end of our system and had to do a whole kind of creative way of running water in a different way and pumping unconventionally to ensure the customers on that end had water. So we have some challenges with this imbalance in our system. And then, of course, on a flip side, wet years like 2013, sometimes we're collecting, there's more water than we are able to store. And then another interesting thing too is part of what we're balancing, if we get good, say, storms like 2015 in the spring, we filled our South Platte system and we actually were not able to run the Roberts Tunnel because we're not legally allowed to bring water over if we don't need it. And so that then creates interesting challenges like at Dillon Reservoir, for example, if water is filled there. So that's some of, the piece of challenges that we deal with, and I'll talk more about that as we go through. So of course, our priority day in and day out is to provide clean, safe, and reliable water to the 1.5 million people we serve. But I wanted to touch on two major initiatives that are going on right now because they're really important and a very big focus. One is our lead reduction program. So this program was launched last year in 2020, and it's a 15-year program. It's always important for me to mention that the water we provide is lead-free and the pipes in our system are not made of lead. However, lead can get into drinking water from customer-owned service lines. So that's obviously the pipe that connects their home, business to our water system. And in 2019, we developed a holistic approach to really get at the root of this problem and still protect public health and the environment. And we incorporate health equity, environmental justice into our approach with this. So a quick little bit more about this program because it really is a huge undertaking. It's really 5 main components. One is corrosion control treatment, where we, in March of 2020, increased the pH of our water to enhance a protective coating on the inside of pipes that actually helps prevent lead release for customers who do have lead service lines. Part of the program is developing a lead service line inventory. One of the challenges is that because we don't own the lead service lines, we haven't known where they all are. So we've created a database and are still doing some of that work with customers to identify them. But we do have an online map where people can type in their address and find out if they have a lead service line. A filter program. A really big change for our customers is that those who have lead service lines need to use a water pitcher filter. We distributed more than 100,000 filters last year and are providing replacement filters for those customers until they are able to, until we're able to replace their lead service line. Which brings me to the biggest piece of the program is actually getting those lead service lines out. We estimate we have 64 to 84,000 of these lead service lines owned by the customer in the system, and we're working proactively to get them out, and it's going to be a 15-year undertaking just because of how massive that effort is. And of course, communications, education, and outreach is key to helping people not feel scared, but know the importance of what they need to do within their own home to ensure that their water is safe. Another big initiative is the North System Renewal project. I touched on this a little bit, but our North System brings snowmelt from the mountains through a series of pipes and to our treatment plants, but we're upgrading and modernizing this system. And it's a really interesting project because as you can imagine, if you're going from, the mountains, Gross Reservoir, through Arvada and into the city of Denver, a lot of homes have been developed and built over the past number of decades. And so by upgrading a huge pipe, you can see that blue pipe on this on the screen there. We're actually working in customer yards that didn't exist when we initially had laid pipe. So it is a very challenging and complex project, but it's really important to ensuring, again, that we're delivering a reliable supply of water to our customers. So touching now and getting into those bigger challenges that we face, we face a number of challenges as we plan for the future, but I really want to talk about 3 right now that are really important and that impact our planning. As a utility, we have like a 50-year planning horizon because we're going to be here and we need to provide water for our customers. So I'll talk about warming climate, growth, and the ongoing crisis on the Colorado River. So first, climate change. As a water utility, climate change means water change. And it's key for us to plan for a secure water supply for our customers for the future. We're one of the few, if not only, water utilities that has a climate scientist on staff. And it's really important that we try to understand what climate change means for us as a water provider. Here's some things that we do know. We know that Colorado's snowpack is melting about 2 weeks earlier than it did 10 years ago. And what we're seeing is with climate change, more extreme weather events, bigger precipitation events, and longer and more frequent droughts as well. And as we look at the future, we could be looking at a hotter and drier future, or we could be looking at a hotter and wetter future, and we just don't know. So part of what we do for our planning process, as I mentioned, planning 50 years into the future, well, It's hard to say what that's going to be, right? But we use scenario planning to identify really a portfolio of options. And I'll talk more about conservation, reuse, and supply as I go along. But really, those are the kind of the big buckets and the levers that we're pulling from as we look to the future. So we want some different options. And then depending on kind of where things are headed, we're going to need to pull in some more than others. But planning for these different futures impacts when we need to plan for more storage and treatment capacity. And it really depends on what future supplies might look like, and customer demands may change as well, along with climate change. Growth is another big one. We all know we love Colorado, and a lot of people love Colorado too. So Colorado is projected to grow from 5 million to 8 million in the next couple of decades. And the Denver metro area could add another 1 million people as well. I do want to mention here that, Denver Water has a fixed service area. So while more people may be moving to the Denver metro area, for us, we're not expanding geographically. Growth we do will be up, not out, so to speak. And housing density does help minimize water use because it does reduce the amount of outdoor landscape that people have. So we're seeing more density in the metro area. Frankly, not everyone is happy with that, but that is the reality of what's happening. And we really believe that proper planning is key to help accommodate future growth. You probably are aware that often new growth is approved and then water utilities are just expected to go out and get the water. Douglas County here in the metro area is a really good example of that. There was tremendous growth in that area in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, but they were fed by groundwater, and those groundwater resources don't recharge as quickly in this climate. And so what they started to see is those aquifers deplete. That's not a sustainable supply. So having coordinated policies around water, land use, transportation, energy is really important. And that concept of regionalism and collaboration is something that we embrace as Denver Water, and we really try to put into practice within the programs that we develop and the ways that we partner. So I wanted to mention the WISE agreement. So WISE stands for Water Infrastructure Supply Efficiency. And this is an example of how we actually work to help with that Douglas County situation. So WISE is an agreement between Denver Water, Aurora Water, and some South Metro water providers. And it basically allows us to maximize existing water rates, water reuse, existing infrastructure to help benefit those areas that have been more reliant on groundwater. So basically, Aurora's pipeline, our excess water will help supplement those south suburbs in a number of years. And then when we need that water, we can take it back. But it's been a very innovative program. And of course, the Colorado River. I'm sure if you pay attention to the news, you've seen a lot of this coverage recently. We get about half of our water supply from the Colorado River, and it's experiencing an unprecedented drought in the last 1,200 years. So this continued drought is a challenge for us in Denver and Colorado as a state, right? Because it increases the possibility that the river water supplies throughout the entire basin could be curtailed due to those interstate compact obligations. So we as a utility, we're working with the state of Colorado, and then the state is working with the other 6 states in the river basin to find temporary, voluntary, and fully compensated ways for large Colorado River users to curtail their use to help prevent the situation from getting worse. Those of you who know our CEO, Jim Lockhead, he's very knowledgeable and involved on this issue, and it's something that we're really paying close attention to and trying to take action on in the role that we can play. So solutions, what are we doing about all of these challenges? So I want to focus on 4 areas: collaboration, water reuse, new supply, and continued conservation and water efficiency. So collaboration and partnerships, hopefully some of these sound familiar to you, but because we have a big footprint across the state, it's really important that we are partnering across the state to help benefit all parties involved. So the Colorado River Cooperative Agreement, this was an agreement effective in 2013 and really ushered in a new era of cooperation between Denver Water and more than 40 West Slope water providers, local governments, and ski areas. And the goal really is to protect watersheds in the Colorado River Basin while allowing Denver Water to develop future supplies, and gross reservoir expansion is a part of that. And there are a couple pieces also that kind of came out of the CRCA. One is the Grand County Mitigation Enhancement and Coordination Plan. I kind of have to laugh because I feel like none of these terms really flow off the tongue very easily. But this effort is really creates a package of river protections designed to help keep the Fraser River and its trout populations healthy as we work to expand gross reservoir. And learning by doing. This is a great monitoring and adaptive management program. It emerged from IGAs tied to our gross reservoir expansion and Northern's Windy Gap firming project. And really it establishes a long-term partnership of cooperation, not looking for conflict and not seeking to place blame, but really this cooperation between a number of groups. And that includes Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the River District, Denver Water, Grand County, Middle Park Water Conservancy, and Northern Water and Trout Unlimited. So through this effort, the group is cooperatively responding to stream health issues and trying to take a look of where there are challenges and coming up with solutions to help manage the environment on a permanent and cooperative basis. Some examples of that, the Fraser Flats project you might be familiar with, the Fraser River sedimentation pond to help clean up all the muck that comes from all the cars that drive, or the salt that can go along that area is another success story coming out of that. I already talked about WISE, so I won't go into that further, but also wanted to touch on our From Forests to Faucets effort. So forests are critical to healthy water supply, and we really saw some devastating impacts from the 1996 Buffalo Creek and the 2002 Hayman fires. And so coming out of that, we partnered with the Forest Service to commit dollars to do proactive forest treatments to really help prevent those catastrophic wildfires. So since 2010, we've committed $33 million matched by partners for a total investment of $66 million to reduce the risk of high severity fires in these priority watersheds. So currently the partnership is with the Rocky Mountain region of the U.S. Forest Service, the Colorado State Forest Service, and the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And what's really cool about this partnership, particularly with the State Forest Service and NRCS involved, it allows us, even though the Forest Service is doing the work, but to achieve these forest treatments on private and state lands. So it's not just work happening on Denver Water's lands, which is important, but also on these other areas for a more holistic approach. If you're interested in learning more, again, our website, denverwater.org, if you search From Forests to Faucets, we've got a pretty cool story map that kind of walks you through the areas and the work that's been done to date and that type of thing. So feel free to go check that out. Water reuse. So Denver Water, we have the right and really the responsibility to reuse the water that we can to extinction. So water from the Colorado River is non-native to this basin, and so we're allowed to reuse that. And so our recycled water program does just that. We take water that's been cleaned at Metro Wastewater and bring it to our recycling plant and clean it again to a level that is suitable for use at irrigation, golf courses, parks. We work with the Denver Zoo as well as Xcel Energy for industrial use for this recycled water. And then, you know, as we look to the future, you may be familiar with a concept called One Water, and it's really about matching the right water source to the right use. And so we recently redeveloped our operations complex in Denver with this One Water philosophy. And so this was really an effort where we tried to be on the leading edge of water management practices, and we have on-site water recycling and water capture that we'll use for irrigation as well as toilet flushing. So, you know, we really wanted to walk the talk in this area. And so we've been working on that. Excuse me for just one moment. Sorry about that. All right. And then new supply. So even with an emphasis on water reuse as well as conservation, which I'll talk about next, we have a responsibility to ensure that we're delivering safe, reliable water to the 1.5 million people that we serve now, as well as the people that will be moving here or the growth that will happen in the future. At the same time, you know, we really believe in protecting the environment and the economies that are dependent on water, such as agriculture and recreation. So gross reservoir expansion, this is a big piece of our multi-pronged approach to meet these challenges. So we're going to always pursue conservation and recycling water, but this storage piece is important as well. So the gross reservoir expansion will raise the height of the existing dam by 131 feet and increase the capacity of the reservoir by 77,000 acre feet. That additional water storage will help prevent future shortfalls and also help offset that imbalance that I talked about earlier when I showed the map. With this project, we'll be providing water to our current and future customers, but also providing environmental benefits to Colorado's rivers and streams. Once it's completed, there'll be more water available to help the Fraser and the Blue Rivers in dry years. So once completed, a lot of the provisions in the CRCA that I mentioned earlier will help give us more flexibility to operate our system in a way to provide further benefit to rivers and streams. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time talking about conservation and efficiency. Denver Water has long been known for our conservation efforts. And coming out of the drought that was in 2002, our board really challenged us to capture those savings and make them permanent. And so we were given a goal of reducing water use by more than 20% over a decade. And so we worked to develop programs to help our customers reach that goal, which they did. And we've done that despite an increase in population. And so as we move forward, we're now taking the next step, and it may sound like just change in words, but I'll explain a little bit about what we mean. So we're evolving from conservation to water efficiency. And really what this is if you think about it, if you're familiar, we used to have a use only what you need campaign. And so the transition is from this mass use only what you need, cut back to more of a tailored approach, helping people understand what is it that they really need? What is efficient? How do I know how much water I should be using? It's a little big brother, but technology helps us understand more about our customer water use habits on an individual level, and we're able to communicate in a much more targeted and customer-centric approach. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So just for some of the rules and regs that we have in place regarding conservation, we require soil amendment for new construction. As you may be aware, the soils here can be really sandy, so that adding that compost, that soil amendment helps soil retain water. So we're working with developers to ensure that's in place when new construction happens. We have outdoor watering rules that are permanent and in place every irrigation season. I'll let Jason talk a little bit more about that, but that's something that we've been having in place for a number of years. Our tiered rate structure. So this is really a balance of ensuring, our customers who may have more trouble paying their bills, that they're charged the lowest for that indoor water use. But water use outside of that essential indoor use is charged at higher and higher tiers. So the more someone's using, the more someone's watering outdoors, the more they're going to pay for those water bills. And then finally, a couple of years ago, we worked with the Colorado State Legislature on Senate Bill 103, and this reset standards, which phased out inefficient fixtures and required retailers to sell only WaterSense certified fixtures. That's sort of equivalent to the Energy Star label. So that's for things like toilets and faucets, shower heads, and urinals, and that type of thing. So we're really trying to move the needle where we can. We have programs tailored for our customers. So here are some of the incentives that we offer. We offer incentives for indoor and outdoor efficient fixtures, something called Garden in a Box. We partner with Resource Central here in Colorado to offer this to our customers. It's a really handy native plants in a box where you can take out a portion of your yard and install these more native species instead. And then we work with our bigger customers like HOAs on performance contracts where they are incentivized to retrofit irrigation products and do landscape change. I mentioned our more targeted approach with customers, so I kind of wanted to show you this. This is an example of our efficiency report. And basically, we used to do this by paper mail back in 2013, but now we've moved electronic, and we're able to actually say to a customer, hey, we know how big your footprint is, and based on your square footage of landscape, here is what you should be using, and smiley face, you're doing a good job, or we're giving you a little bit of a sad face and you could be doing better. So this is something that we're providing to our single family customers and multifamily customers so that they can really have a better handle on their water use. And of course, with this, we also provide tips on, what they could be doing to make their homes more efficient. Education and outreach, that's of course my passion as the public affairs person. So we're always thinking about, what's the story we have to tell? What do we want people to know? And how can we put it on all of the channels that we have? So we try to reach people through our bill inserts, where we're reminding people of wise water use and the rules. We have multiple different platforms to engage customers. And we even have a youth education program. It's a K-12 program where, really, we believe that everyone should value water. And so if we start at a young age, helping educate our youth will help educate their parents and their teachers and really have that appreciation for water starting even at a young age. So my last slide here that I will show some of the platforms that we use to engage. Our TAP news site, I think Holly mentioned that at the beginning, so denverwater.org/tap. Well, I'll have this on the slide at the end, but I really encourage you, if you're interested, to sign up. Once a week, we send headlines, so you don't even have to go search for it, but we're always trying to help educate our customers on where their water comes from and what do we do to help keep it safe and what can they do, to use it wisely, and how do we feature people who are doing it right, how customers who have changed out their landscapes and showing what they have to do. So that is a lot of what we're working on. I hope I didn't go too fast there. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason so he can talk about our water shortage and just preparedness and the outlook. Jason.
Wonderful, Stacy. Thank you so much and great information. Hi, everybody. And yeah, we'll be talking about water shortage preparedness, kind of the path that we've taken at Denver Water since 2002 and what our current efforts kind of focus on. And then, afterwards, of course, any questions we just love to hear if you've got them. So, all right, Stacy, since you're controlling, I appreciate it. We'll go to the first slide. A lot to read here. So I am going to chat while you guys kind of peruse it. So Denver Water, drought is no stranger to Colorado as a whole, and certainly not to Denver Water. You can see that in a 103-year history, we've actually gone into mandatory watering restrictions 28 times. And kind of every single time we see they're broken down in the chart, you can see every time that we've gone into a water shortage, and it's important to focus on water shortage, not drought. Sometimes it was drought, but other times it's just a lack of supply and a higher demand. And so any water shortage event, of course, is important for us to address. But every time we had one that came up, we responded and tried to be proactive, right? So sometimes we built more infrastructure. Sometimes we developed agreements. Sometimes we put forth plans. And every time we've had to change the way that we do business in order to better serve and our customers, and to also treat this resource with the respect it needs. So as you go through, you'll see, of course, the 2000s, right? And a lot of you were probably here in 2002, 2003 for what turned out to be a very significant drought. And then, of course, in the 2010s, we had 2012, 2013, also significant. Of course, the interesting thing is 2002, really the end of that drought was in March of 2003. We had a major snowstorm on both the Front Range and the West Slope. And then 2010s, really the end of that drought was the major rainstorm that we had in September of 2013, which kind of finished filling the reservoirs. So two major events at the end of two major droughts. One thing I always say is, two does not make a trend. And so whenever people are looking for that next drought buster, it's not a guarantee that we'll get it, just because we've gotten it before. We have to make sure that we prepare for the times that we don't. And next slide, Stacy. So after 2002, the organization took a page from emergency management and did what was called an after action report. Basically, after you have a disaster or an emergency, you look at what things went right and what things could be improved. And you take those lessons and then you apply them. And that obviously is the best way to ensure that you are going forward with the best of intentions and the best plan. And so you'll see here this quote that was inside of our after action from 2002. Again, this was a drought that challenged the way that we operated and we thought, and the whole way that we assumed that drought would come into the organization. And since then, in the now 19 years later, we have made some radical changes, some of which Stacy had already talked about. Recycled water program. We changed the way that we put out conservation message and water efficiency. But we also did a couple of other things on the planning side, which I'll talk about now. Next slide, Stace. Thank you. So Stacy mentioned the annual summer watering rules. Now, this is something that went into effect, I believe it was 2005. And this was a direct result of the 2002-2003 drought. Now, what this means is every year, regardless if it's a wet year or a dry year, these rules go into effect. And in fact, our customers will start receiving the annual summer watering rules update here in the next week. It'll start hitting their mailboxes. So what basically this does is it puts forth only watering 3 times a week, not wasting water, making sure that you're not watering between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. where you're going to lose an awful lot of it during hot days. So an important thing to focus on here is that these restrictions, which are annual and we put in place every single year, are actually many jurisdictions stage 1 restrictions. So we feel proactive and happy that we're doing that. And we have seen customers respond by following them. And we have seen some great savings since 2005. And so they're going into effect in, I guess, about 9 days. All right, next slide, Stacy. So another thing that we did when my position was created 6 years ago, we wanted to bring emergency management into the idea of water shortage preparedness. Water shortage itself is a brand new term. As I mentioned before, we really focused on drought, but of course there are so many different ways that you could have a water shortage. Obviously with the Colorado River and a potential call coming on that, there's a way you could have a water shortage. We could have some sort of emergency inside of our system. We could have a wildfire that puts too much debris inside the reservoirs, which is what Fort Collins is facing a little bit of right now. So there's all these different ways, but what emergency management's main goal and theory is that it doesn't matter the cause of a event, the reaction, the response, the planning, and the preparedness beforehand can all be the same. And so that's what we've tried to do, is to ensure that no matter the cause of water shortage, we are ready to put into place our processes, our plans, and that we constantly get ready for these events. So the first thing that we put together and has been updated every year, and you can see the 2020 version here, is the Water Shortage Response Implementation Plan. As Stacy said, I don't know why all these things are kind of hard to pronounce, but there it is. Now, if you'll see the website on the bottom of this slide, you can go there and you can actually look at all of our water shortage preparedness information. You can find this plan. You could also see the different stages. So you can go there at any point that you'd like, and you can see the most updated information that we have. And that's one thing we also did along with the plan, is really build this robust site where we can give information and be transparent so that everybody knows what to expect if we get into a dry period. And as Stacy mentioned as well, of course, we have TAP, which is our online news source that is also excellent for articles on drought and water shortage and response. So then the organization realized after 2002, 2003, that we inside the organization were not working together. We were not working smartly, nor were we working efficiently. In fact, there were a lot of gaps inside of our response to that drought. There was redundancies. We found out that some ideas that one section of the organization came up with actually would not work inside of the system itself. And so what that demonstrated to us is we have to have, I know everyone loves committees, but this one is legitimate. We had to have a standing committee of experts from across the organization that meets routinely. And we have done that now for, I think, about 14 years, 13 years, something like that. But as you look through the different sections of this committee structure, you'll see that every single portion of Denver Water is represented. This makes sure that we're all walking to the same, or marching the same tune, that we have the same goals, that we understand what can work, that we don't have gaps. During dry years, we meet maybe twice a year. We run workshops, exercises, things like that to make sure that we're still on top of our processes. In years like this, we meet pretty regularly, sometimes once a week, sometimes once every 2 weeks, but we are constantly meeting, discussing, chatting, and there's conversations going in just with groups inside of it. So you can see that really the way that we want it is that there is no possibility of having something fall through the cracks, and it's worked really well so far. All right, so I want to go over our drought response stages right now so that you guys can see kind of what we're looking at. Now, of course, the annual watering rules, that's every year, and that's not part of drought response stages. Again, we even implement those in wet years. But the first stage that we would go on is called a drought watch. Now, this is a newer one. We actually implemented it back in 2013, or I say created it. We used to not have a drought watch, but we realized that really a mentality change, which we go for all the time in our communications anyways, but a really acute mentality change is needed before we really start putting restrictions onto customers. And so it's a twofold. The drought watch, it gets people ready for the fact that there might be restrictions. It gets businesses ready for that fact so that they can start preparing as well. It makes people's mentality change towards drought maybe quicker than normal. But the other thing is it allows our customers, it gives them the option to start saving water. The real goal too, if we can get enough water saved in a drought watch, and all of a sudden we see that these different conditions we look at are improving, then maybe we don't even have to go on restrictions, right? So we want to give them that chance. But a drought watch is mostly voluntary restrictions, some mandatory restrictions for some of our fixed amount contracts, but mostly voluntary. Stage one is when you start getting into actual restrictions, mandatory restrictions, and this focuses on outdoor irrigation. So we can do 1 or 2 times a week watering, lawn watering. And important to focus or to point out that in stage 1 restrictions and in stage 2, we still allow hand watering of trees. The tree canopy in Denver is incredibly important, both for quality of life and just kind of the health and well-being of our customers, but also that tree cover provides shade, which, believe it or not, actually helps with water retention as well. So we want to retain the tree canopy. When you get into a stage 1 restriction, that's when you start seeing lawns kind of start to suffer a bit, but we do keep the trees as watered as they need. Stage 2 is when we do a ban on most outdoor irrigation. Again, most being that we still allow hand watering of trees and hand watering of vegetable gardens, perennials, things like that. But stage 2 restriction is a complete elimination of irrigation on grass. On grass. One thing we've been working towards on this idea of stage 2 restrictions is something called a water budget. Now, this is a ways off, but it's something we're very excited about, and we've already been able to implement with some of our larger customers, such as Denver parks. What this does is we give them a budget of water, and the budget changes depending on what restrictions we're on. But then they get to decide where and when they use that water budget. And so, for instance, for parks, maybe there are just a few playing fields that they really want to make sure are green and healthy and kept watered, but then they can let all of the other parts of their parks go without irrigation. We want them to make that decision. We found that with the larger customers, with us giving them days of the week they can water, it doesn't work as well. We're really hoping to continue to implement these water budgets into the future, and we'll see what happens. But right now it's exciting to allow our customers to have a little bit more say. Okay, and then stage 3 restrictions, it's there. We have a plan for it, but the entire goal of the committee, the entire goal of water shortage preparedness is we never get to a stage 3. A stage 3 is a rationing of indoor water use. It's like what you saw in South Africa for a time. And something like that is very extreme. And it is absolutely our goal to never get to that point. But you have to have a plan for everything, and so we do. Okay, let's go through our current conditions and then kind of talk about a little bit of our outreach. So you'll see that, and these snowpack graphs that you'll see are not for the entire river. They only are from Denver Water's collection system, our SNOTEL sites that are along our diversion facilities. And so it's only one small portion of the South Platte River watershed, but it's the portion that we look at for our water collection. And so in the South Platte, you can see we've actually been running fairly average, dipped down a little bit in mid-April, but then it has popped back to close to average. So right now we're at 96% of normal, and then 92% of what our normal peak would be. And so the South Platte has not been terrible as far as snowpack. One thing to keep in mind is, I know you guys know, especially those that live on the western slope, the soils are incredibly dry. And that's why we've had such bad wildfires. And so we just don't know how dry, though. We don't know how much water those soils are going to soak up. So even though it's an average snowpack, that does not mean it'll be an average stream flow. And so the next couple of weeks, as the snowpack starts to melt, we'll see what those stream flows are, what the waterways look like, and we'll have a better idea of what this summer could portend. So let's go ahead and go to the Colorado River watershed. Now, this one is certainly more of a concern. You can see that whereas those March storms that came into the Front Range and east of the Divide really saw a boost into the South Platte watershed, we did not see the same in the Colorado River watershed. Right now, we're at about 84% of normal, 83% of peak. It's unlikely that it's going to be going up much more inside of our snowtail sites. And so again, it's just a wait and see of what the stream flow looks like, but you can see right now it's a little low. So we look at a lot of indicators to decide whether or not to go on restrictions. And we try to factor in both tangible information such as this reservoir contents. And we also look at items that are more kind of thought processes. What are other jurisdictions doing? What are our customers thinking? And so we do look at a lot of things. Reservoir content, so, is definitely an important one. You can see right now that we are actually at 77% full, and normally this time of year we'd be at 79% full. So the reservoirs are still about average. Now, when you look at these lines that project to the right, the red, the bottom line, that's a 10% possibility worst case scenario. The line on the top is a 10% best case scenario. So obviously the one to really follow is that green line right in the middle. We think that we'll get up to about 92% full in our reservoirs. And that is still okay. It's not great, right? We would love to have 100%, but it's okay. And so that indicator, at least right now, we're kind of following, and we'll see what happens with the actual stream flows. So how are we making sure that we can stay on the same page, not just internally, like I told you about, but also externally? Well, one of the ways that we do it is through public affairs, Stacy's group, and they send out messages in various mediums, right? So they use Twitter, they use other online accounts. Of course, they use TAP, which we've already talked about a couple of times. The big things that we focus on during non-irrigation season, you can see here, right? So we focus also on leaks, we focus on water efficiency, we focus on landscape change. We try to show folks that they can use native plants, and they can replace their lawns in order to put in beautiful vegetation that will use far less water. And we help them with that. We have a Garden in the Box project that we Resource Central partners with us on that. And then on the right, you can see we also give them a strategic view, our customers, of the bigger ideas, the Colorado River, what that means for Denver water. 50% of our water comes from the Colorado River. So anything that impacts that river impacts us. And you can basically, as a customer, you can try to see both the local and the big picture. And we think education is important, especially for conservation and efficiency. In addition, we also have internal and external coordination efforts that are ongoing. The internal ones we've already talked about, the Water Shortage Preparedness Committee. We present to the different divisions and sections in Denver Water so they know what they'll have to do if we ever get to the point of restrictions. They'll know what to look out for as we start watching indicators for drought. We do scenario planning for the short term and the very long term. What are our scenarios all the way from best guess to best case to worst case, and we are constantly looking at that. Externally, we've been pretty excited. The last couple of months, we partnered with Aurora Water, and we created two coordination groups. First is the Denver Aurora Metro Drought Coordination Group. This is made up of 26 water providers in the metro area. Some are very small, all the way up to the larger Denver and Aurora. And what we've done is, for the first time, we've had all the providers in one place. We meet once a month right now, and that can increase. But we talk about what our thoughts are on restrictions, how our systems interrelate to each other. What are we saying inside of our collection systems? what messaging are we trying to put forth to our customers? We've had really a lot of success sharing messages, communications with each other, and also stories and interviews. And then also, of course, we have a front range drought coordination group we put together. That's every major metro group, metro area from Fort Collins all the way down to Pueblo. And we also coordinate the same things: messaging, drought, what are we thinking? It allows us all to be on the same page. The state has a municipal water impact task force that we participate in. Of course, we do presentations like this. But in that way, we can ensure that everyone has the same picture, that we're all kind of understanding what things look like and what everyone else is thinking. It's really incredible to see. All right, so that is my presentation. Again, I urge you to go to TAP or to the water shortage website. More information for you, and just kind of check it out. And any questions for us?
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thanks for a great presentation. Thanks, Stacy and Jason. Do we have any questions? I see there's 2 here, but I just wanted to make sure people go down at the bottom of their Zoom, and you can actually go into the chat room and ask any questions. There's one, someone had asked about why not start at stage 1 restrictions. I know that here even in Grand County, I mean, we're talking about, the Colorado River, and you've mentioned too about how it's below where it needs to be, around 83%. Why wouldn't Denver Water want to start at stage 1?
And Stacy's all right if I take this one? Want to make sure not to cut you out. Yeah, so, again, stage 1, when we need to go to stage 1, when we know the water savings that we need to achieve in order to be able to meet the needs of customers and into the future, we will go on to stage 1. Drought Watch is really there as a proactive step. So, for instance, if we didn't have Drought Watch and we just had stage 1, we would still be going on to stage 1 at the exact same time. But now we just have a step we can do earlier. That's the Drought Watch step. And ideally, maybe get some savings out of it as well.
Okay. We also have a question from Mark Schneider. Can you provide an update on where the proposed Roundup program, Colorado counties that provide Denver Water?
Sure, I can talk about that. So, Mark, I think you're talking about Roundup through Denver Water specifically, right? Not broader than that. So I'm going to speak to Denver Water. So basically, Mark probably is aware, we have a Citizens Advisory Committee, and in late 2018, they proposed to our board that we pursue a Roundup program where, customers could round up on their bill and pick from a handful of nonprofits to donate to that could, potentially help the West Slope or rivers in there. And so our board asked our staff to evaluate it and did consider the effort. But they, in the end, our board in early 2019 said Denver Water's not going to pursue that. And there's a few reasons for that. A piece of it is labor costs for system enhancements to even just get the program up and running. But also the piece of collecting and processing donations through a Roundup program creates a heavy and ongoing administrative burden for Denver Water staff. So, our water rates can't be commingled with other funds that are collected in this manner. We'd have to set up different bank accounts, different IRS guidelines, and there's a lot of other pieces to that. In addition, when we think about holistically what Denver Water is doing to invest and support what the CEC's objectives are, we look at, we have more than 35 programs and agreements that support the environment and watersheds where we operate. I talked a lot about this earlier in my presentation. And so really, for those reasons, it just didn't really meet our needs, or we didn't think it was something that we could pursue. And I know there was some talk about, revisiting this again with the CAC. They did meet a week or two ago and decided not to pursue it again formally with our board, because the board just spoke to this a couple of years ago and nothing really has changed in that matter. So that's where we're at with that.
Okay. Thanks, Stacy. I had a question. One was, is Denver Water considering, or I don't know if any of the Front Range communities are considering, well, I know Castle Rock is considering incentives that will actually pay residents, or even provide some type of program where you can replace turf that's not really being used with xeriscaping. So, for example, I know that in some communities across the country, they'll actually pay per square foot of turf that you actually replace with some kind of xeriscaping or any type of kind of astroturf. And then I know that like Las Vegas is talking about taking a huge amount of their unused turf and replacing it, because there's so much water that's wasted on grass that you kind of see, but it's not played on, not really actively used. But I was just wondering if you guys have been talking about that at all.
Yeah, definitely talking about that. And there are some interesting, similarities and also differences in some of the examples that you brought up. So, the fun fact is Denver Water coined that term xeriscape over 30 years ago, right? And so that concept did come out of Denver Water, and it's something that, like Jason talked about, we do encourage our customers to do. And we actually, have seen landscape change. So over the past couple of decades, we've seen a decrease of about 30% in outdoor water use. And we're seeing landscape change occur naturally. And as you think about, I talked about growth in the Denver area, those redevelopments, you're seeing more building and a lot less turf and landscape in that process. So that's a piece of it. And then actually, looking at Las Vegas itself, there's a lot of a difference in their climate. So Las Vegas has year-round irrigation. So investing in a program like that, there's like the ROI and the amount saved is a lot bigger than what we would see here in the Denver area. That's not to say, we're not, it's completely, off the table forever. But there are other considerations. Denver has a heat island problem, especially with these increasing weather extremes that we're seeing. And so landscape choice is just as important as turf removal. So, as we think about planning for future landscapes, we want landscapes to be functional. Jason talked about the tree canopy, like shading and cooling is important. It weighs green infrastructure to help manage storm runoff. So all those pieces are part of what, we're talking about and looking at. So long answer to say, we've heard the question and we are evaluating it, but when you hear about some of these programs in other cities, like no two cities are alike, and those climate differences make a big difference as we're evaluating the ROI on that.
Okay, thanks. And by the way, anyone who's on here that's listening, Denver Water has a fantastic resource page that talks about xeriscaping and plants that you can use, and a variety of water conservation tips. So I would definitely go to their webpage and look at that. So, yeah. Anyone else have a question at all?
I do see a question here, and it might have just come into me, and I have not been looking at the chat throughout this, but just kind of asking about the forest fires we saw recently, like this past year, and impact to Denver Water. I don't have it super fresh in my head, but certainly there were fires like, close to our facilities or in our watersheds, and those are always situations where our water quality folks are looking and having to monitor and sometimes adjust treatment. So, it's still like the Hayman and the Buffalo Creek fires of, decades ago, those impacts we're still feeling. We still get a lot of, when there's big rainstorm events up at Cheeseman Reservoir, that runoff, that sedimentation still flows into the waterways and into the reservoir. And so we see those lasting effects. While we've had some really additional severe fires in Colorado, I don't think those have been as directly negatively impacting us, but there's almost always implications when it is close to our watershed. And so it's definitely a big problem here in Colorado.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially with East Troublesome and all of that, we're kind of worried about, obviously, in Grand County, and worried about that. So, yeah. Okay. Any other questions that we have for Stacy and Jason? Doesn't look like it. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today, and please join us next month for our next series. And it's actually going to be on kind of fire impacts to our landscape and to our watershed. And we'll be having a conversation with Esther Vincent from Northern Water. And please join us then. And it's going to be, it looks like May 27th. So tune in and we'll be sending some more marketing information on that. But thank you guys. I appreciate your time, and everyone take care.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.